Good evening from Washington, D.C. I'm Jen Psaki. Chris Hayes has the night off, and he will be back tomorrow night. Donald Trump was back in court this morning for day 10, if you're counting, of his criminal trial. Today's proceedings began with another hearing on the ex-president's repeated, and I mean repeated, violations of his gag order. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show for sure. But things really got interesting once Keith Davidson returned to the stand today. He's the former lawyer for both of the women Trump is accused of paying off, Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels. From the witness stand, Davidson really pulled back the curtain on a 2018 statement he wrote on behalf of Daniels, seeming to deny her affair with Trump. He admitted, with Trump sitting right in front of him in the courtroom, that the Stormy Daniels statement was just designed to look like a denial. It was basically a non-denial denial, you could say. The statement read, quote, "I recently became aware that certain news outlets are alleging that I had a sexual and/or romantic affair with Donald Trump many, many years ago. I am stating with complete clarity that this is absolutely false." The and/or is sort of a strange part of that statement. But now Davidson used some particularly lawyerly language, if I may say so, to parse why exactly he believed that statement to be true, saying, quote, "I don't think that anyone had ever alleged that any interaction between Daniels was romantic." Look, I've written a lot of statements in my time, not about this sort of thing, fortunately. But despite the "we were just friends with benefits" vibe of Davidson's answers, the interesting part, to me at least, was actually that there was no outright denial of what happened or who was behind the attempt to cover it up. And he testified that it was his understanding that Trump and Daniels did indeed have a bit of a thing going on, you could say. Later in the afternoon, the jury heard audio of Michael Cohen for the first time in the form of a previously released recording of a phone call where Cohen and Trump discussed paying off McDougal to cover up that affair, including Cohen discussing financing and Trump seeming to confirm the $150,000 amount. Now, we knew that recording was out there, but today the jury got to hear Donald Trump in his own voice, and there's something to that.
I've spoken to Alan Weisselberg about how to set the whole thing up with
So what are we going to
funding. Yes. And it's all the stuff, because, you never know where that company, you never know what he's going to be. Correct. So I'm all over that. And I spoke to Alan about it when it comes time for the financing, which will be.
Listen, what financing?
We'll have to pay you. So
I'll pay the cash.
No. I got no.
Check.
No, a check. It's pretty specific. The jury also heard a recording between Cohen and Keith Davidson, this time regarding Stormy Daniels. And this recording we didn't know about before today.
Nobody's thinking about Michael. You understand? And despite what, like, for example, what the earlier conversation, and who else would do that for somebody? Who else?
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
Because I care about the guy.
Right.
And I wasn't going to play penny wise, pound foolish.
Right.
Right? And I'm sitting there and I'm saying to myself, what about me?
Yeah.
What about me? And I can't even tell you how many times he said to me, I hate the fact that we did it. And my comment to him was, but every person that you've spoken to told you it was the right move.
Right.
And that was a lot of Michael Cohen and only a tiny bit of Keith Davidson in that recording. But as NBC News reports, quote, Davidson said he understood that he referred to Trump and "we did it" referred to the payment to Daniels. Couldn't be much more clear than that, I think. And remember, the entire argument, or big part of the argument being made by the defense, is Trump knew nothing about these payments, that Michael Cohen effectively went completely rogue when he paid these women. For what reason, no one can explain, other than, of course, Trump. The evidence presented today seems to fly in the face of the notion this all happened without Trump's knowledge, something Michael Cohen himself will likely attest to when he takes the stand later in the trial. We're also expecting to hear from others close to Trump, including his longtime aide, Hope Hicks, who was on some of these calls, who could provide a mountain of new evidence in the days ahead. Lisa Rubin is an MSNBC legal correspondent who was inside the courthouse today. George Conway is an attorney and contributing writer at The Atlantic, where he is covering the Trump trials. He spent many days in the courthouse. Mary McCord spent nearly 20 years as a federal prosecutor at the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C., where she served as the chief of the criminal division. And she currently co-hosts the excellent, informative, award-winning podcast Prosecuting Donald Trump. And they all join me now. So, Lisa, I'm going to start with you because you were at the trial today. Tell us what it was like in the room there today. And what was it like when they heard these recordings for the first time?
Jen, we heard a lot of recordings for the first time. So we heard the two that you just mentioned. And then there were others that the defense admitted because they say that they demonstrate that Keith Davidson was a person not to be trusted, that he was playing games with the Stormy Daniels story, and that in particular, by the spring of 2018, when Michael Avenatti took over Stormy Daniels' case, he was effectively saying to people, you know that this is all what my grandmother in Yiddish would call bubba mice, and she knows that this is bubba mice, and this story isn't true. And the defense tried to get Davidson to say that that was his own understanding of the story, which he wouldn't. I think of those calls, the one that had the most impact, even though Trump's voice wasn't on it, was the one about Stormy Daniels for a couple of reasons. One, the falsification of the business records that comprises the actual crime charged here. It's not about Karen McDougal. It's about Stormy Daniels. The second part is that Michael Cohen and Keith Davidson had that conversation in the fall of 2017 before Michael Cohen himself really went rogue and broke from Trump world. And so to hear Michael Cohen say in his own voice, not only nobody's worried about me, but I can't tell you how many times he and I have talked about the fact that he hated that we did this settlement, and yet everyone around him consistently told him it was the right thing to do. That demonstrates that the people within the cone of knowledge might not have just been Cohen and Pecker and Davidson and Trump, but potentially others as well, at least by the fall of 2017, even if they didn't know so in real time. That was the call, Jen, to me, that had the most impact. And I'm interested to see, as this goes on, whether we'll hear even further recordings that Cohen made on his own and or that other participants may have made, because the prosecution has said to us all along, you think this case is all about Michael Cohen. But really, you're going to see a whole lot of evidence that you didn't expect. We're going to show you paper and email and text messages and recordings. And sure enough, that's exactly what they've done so far.
Yeah, I mean, that recording, I hate the fact that we did it. It was Michael Cohen repeating of something Trump had said to him. It also struck me as pretty significant. And also, we hadn't heard that recording before, so maybe there's going to be many more things we hear. But what struck you today, George, about that?
That absolutely struck me. I mean, I saw some people commenting online that somehow the defense may have thought that was helpful, but I cannot for the life of me see that. It's like having two bank robbers, and one later, they rob the bank, and then one bank robber later says on tape to somebody else, you know, my co-conspirator, my co-bank robber, the guy who drove the getaway car, kind of regrets that we did that. Well,
we shouldn't have robbed the bank.
We shouldn't have robbed the bank.
Yeah.
That does not help the defense. And the other thing about it is, again, as Lisa pointed out, the timing. This was back when Cohen was not only in Trump's good graces, but was acting, as the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York later said, acting for the benefit of and at the direction of individual number one, Donald J. Trump.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, Mary, we were just talking earlier before we came on set just about what they're trying to do, the prosecution, to kind of set this up for Michael Cohen's testimony, right? He has some credibility issues out there, which people have spoken about. That's something that's part of the defense's line of argument. So what were they trying to do today with playing some of these recordings and putting some questioning out there?
I think credibility issues are an understatement. Andrew and I
worked in diplomacy.
That's right. So, you know, they're doing a couple of things. They're going to corroborate every single possible way they can through texts, through emails, through recordings, corroborate in advance the things they expect him to say. But they're also trying to take the sting out of the bad stuff. They are not shying away from painting him as somebody, frankly, that no one seemed to like, right? The people who have testified so far, including in particular Mr. Davidson, didn't really have nice things to say about Mr. Cohen, and certainly thought that he was aggressive and put pressure on people and was nasty and things like that. And I think they want to get the jury kind of like comfortable with this so that that's not a new thing by the time that he takes the stand, so that they can focus on what he's testifying to and how that's been corroborated by the other evidence.
The psychology of this as a non-lawyer is so interesting to me. Lisa, this may not have been the most important part of today, but I thought Keith Davidson sort of parsing his words when discussing the denial he wrote for Stormy Daniels, I don't know, it felt a little odd, but I'm sure there was a strategy to it. What do you think?
Well, first of all, Jen, when I was thinking about Keith Davidson on the stand explaining how he thought that those statements were factually accurate, even though anyone could see on their face how misleading they were, I thought to myself, this is why normal people hate lawyers, right?
Yes.
Because we do things like this.
So lawyerly, yes.
It's so lawyerly, and it's why, people make lawyer jokes. But in all seriousness, I think Keith Davidson had a reasonable explanation for it. He had a client who was chomping at the bit to exploit some of the notoriety that she was getting. And at the same time, she took seriously the fact that the agreement that she had a liquidated damages clause that meant that if she breached the confidentiality part of the agreement, she could have to pay $1 million for each violation. And so he was sort of trying to titrate between a client who very much wanted to be in the public eye and mitigating risk for her. And that's how he chose to do it. From that standpoint, the sort of obnoxiousness of Keith Davidson's trying to be like, oh, this is what I did, and it was too cute by half, and yeah, I did it. It's more sympathetic in that eye. Whether the jury will take that away, I'm not sure. But again, to Mary's point, I think the prosecution is doing an overall good job sort of situating this story and the seaminess of some of the people involved. They don't have to like these folks. They just have to believe they're telling the truth about the ultimate alleged bad guy here, the former president of the United States.